This involves developing an overall strategy for the expected conduct and scope of the examination, the nature, extent, and timing of which vary with the size and complexity, and experience with a knowledge of the entity. A. Audit planning. B. Audit procedure. C. Audit program. D. Audit working papers. The answer is letter A. Audit planning. One. Initial planning involves four matters. Which of the following is not one of these? A. Develop an overall audit strategy. B. Request that bank balances be confirmed. C. Schedule engagement staff and audit specialists. D. Identify the client's reason for the audit. The answer is letter B. Request that the bank balances be confirmed. Bank confirmation is an audit procedure, not part in audit planning. A CPA is conducting the first examination of a client's financial statements. The CPA hopes to reduce the audit work by consulting with the predecessor auditor and reviewing the predecessor's working papers. This procedure is A. Acceptable if the client and the predecessor auditor agree to it. B. Acceptable if the CPA refers in the audit report to reliance upon the predecessor auditor's work. C. Required if the CPA is to render an unmodified opinion. D. Unacceptable because the CPA should bring an independent viewpoint to a new engagement. Please take note that letter B, letter C and letter D are all wrong answer. The correct answer is letter A. Coordinating with predecessor auditor is acceptable as long as both of the client and predecessor audit agree. The preliminary judgment about materiality and the amount of audit evidence accumulated are related. A. Directly. B. Indirectly. C. Not. D. Inversely. The answer is letter D. Materiality and amount of audit evidence are inversely related. If you put materiality at higher amount, it means you will need lesser amount of audit evidence to be accumulated. Which of the following statements is not correct about materiality? A. The concept of materiality recognizes that some matters are important for fair presentation of financial statements in conformity with the applicable financial reporting framework, while other matters are not important. B. An auditor considers materiality for planning purposes in terms of the largest aggregate level of misstatements that could be material to any one of the financial statements. C. Materiality judgments are made in light of surrounding circumstances and necessarily involve both quantitative and qualitative judgments. D. An auditor's consideration of materiality is influenced by the auditor's perception of the needs of a reasonable person who will rely on the financial statements. Please take note that letter A, letter C and letter D are all correct about materiality. On the other hand, what makes letter B incorrect is the word largest. If we say total aggregate amount, we will use the smallest aggregate amount, not the largest. Qualitative factors can affect an auditor's assessment of materiality. Which of the following qualitative factors could influence the assessment of materiality? I. Misstatements that are otherwise immaterial may be material if affect earnings trends. 2. Minor misstatements resulting from the consequences of contractual obligations. A. I only. B. 2 only. C. 1 and 2. D. Neither 1 or 2. Both 1 and 2 are correct. These two can affect assessment of materiality. Auditors frequently refer to the terms audit assurance, overall assurance, and level of assurance to refer to A. Detection risk. B. Audit report risk. C. Acceptable audit risk. D. Inherent risk. The answer is letter C. Acceptable audit risk. The risk that financial statements are likely to be misstated materially without regard to the effectiveness of internal control is the A. Inherent risk. B. Audit risk. C. Client risk. D. Control risk. The answer is letter A. Inherent risk. Please take note of the definition of inherent risk. Which of the following is an incorrect statement? A. Detection risk cannot be changed at the auditor's discretion. B. If individual audit risk remains the same, detection risk bears an inverse relationship to inherent and control risk. C. The greater the inherent and control risk the auditor believes exist, the less detection risk that can be accepted. D. The auditor might make separate or combines assessments of inherent risk and control risk. Letter B, letter C, and letter D are all correct. Please take note as these three are discuss the relationship of inherent risk, the control risk, and the detection risk. On the other hand, the correct is letter A. What makes it wrong is that detection risk is the only risk, then an auditor can change whether you minimized or maximize it. Relationship between control risk and detection risk is ordinarily A. Parallel, B. Direct, C. Inverse, D. Equal. The answer is letter C. Inversely related. Which of the following is not correct regarding an auditor's decision that a lower acceptable audit risk is appropriate? A. More evidence is accumulated. B. Less evidence is accumulated. C. Special care is required in assigning experienced staff. D. Review of audit documentation is performed by personnel not assigned to the engagement. The answer is letter B. Less evidence is accumulated. If you chose a lower acceptable risk, then you shall be more diligent, make more substantive tests to have more evidence. An auditor should design the written audit program so that A. All material transactions will be selected for substantive testing. B. Substantive tests prior to the balance sheet date will be minimized. C. The audit procedures selected will achieve specific audit objectives. D. Each account balance will be tested under either tests of controls or tests of transactions. The answer is letter C. The audit procedures selected will achieve specific audit objectives. These consist of the analysis of significant ratios and trends, including the resulting investigation of fluctuations and relationship that are inconsistent with other relevant information or deviate from predictable amount. A. Financial statement analysis. B. Variance analysis. C. Analytical procedures. D. Regression analysis. The description above is the definition of analytical procedures. Please take note.